So we are back with our experts, and this time we'll be breaking down how to actually be successful with the APC exam on the day. So after you have done your 5 days pre-release period and you've gone through everything, now it's about tackling the big giant, which is the actual APC exam. So to not waste any more time, Sia, I will direct the question to you. So, so now we have the information of the day, right? So what approach must one follow to make sure that they effectively read the case study, considering that it's quite long?
Okay, no, thank you so much for that. It's a hard question, by the way, I have to say. But I think in terms of APC, what you need to understand when you're on the day is that yes, APC is a journey until you get to the day. But what you now need to remember is that it's an exam on the day. And with all exams, what you have to do is understand first the scenario before you get into answering it. So what you would have done before that, you have already read the pre-release, but now there's more information on the day, which gives more context and more practical what happens on the day and more information. So what you need to do first is read the information and understand it. With any exam, before you answer, you're supposed to understand. So sit down and first start by reading and understanding the information. Before you even start thinking about what could be a trigger, what you are need to answer, the first read should be, I'm reading here just to understand so I know this entity in order for me to assist them with whatever problems they may have. And then after that, you'll follow in a way, but in a shorter route, a way that you would follow when you do the pre-release, where you look for the triggers, but now you look at what can I match to the pre-release information? What can I match to my information so you can know what to match with in terms of your tasks that you have prepared, what to match it with the information that I've read before. Then you do another read again, just for more understanding and more depth, because that will be very important as you answer the question. So do that read where you're just reading for understanding. Do the read where you're looking for what matches the triggers that came from before, and then you do a final read just so that you're able to cover it, and then you can start answering.
Thank you for that. And I think, like you said, matching the pre-release to the information of the day is very essential. And now the second question will come to you, Dida. So now as a candidate, I have read the pre-release information for the 5 days and I've received now the information of the day. How do I make sure that in my answering, I am pulling through what is written in the pre-release as well as the information of the day to make sure that I'm getting that competent response?
Thanks. I think the most important thing is an understanding of the business. It goes back to that again. If I get you up just before the exam starts and I ask you about the business, are you able to tell me about it without necessarily going back into the previous paper itself and going to read it? And the reason why it's important to understand the business in its entirety as much as you can, of course, not to be an expert and all, is because you're able to pick on the information on the day, what's new or what's redirected. And many a times is some candidates will struggle to see what changed now and go on with the information that they had in the pre-release information. Some stuff may be redirected, some stuff may be completely new, or some stuff may have advanced. If you're unable to know what was there before, it's going to be difficult to see the advancement and therefore speak and marry the information as Siabonga says. So it goes back to a good understanding of the information right before you get the information on the day itself. Are you able to tell me and understand the pre-release itself? And then as you go on to read the information on the day, you're able to see the similarities, see what advanced, see what now changed completely. Because to be able to talk on that and in the two words that are quite famous, coverage and depth on that is what will bring a very smooth and proper response to any task at all.
I love that. And I think what candidates must also consider is the fact that when you are considering pre-release and the information on the day, it's very important not to theory dump, because now you're going to try to fit your research into the evolved information of the day. And sometimes information may not be relevant. So I think that's very important.
And that is
And
why, if I may, sorry interrupting, and that is why when you're reading the pre-release information, we shouldn't read it with the information of the day in mind. Read the pre-release for what it is. Let's just understand the PRI as it is. And as I prepare, I'm not preparing answers for a question. I'm going to get a question and devise an answer off of that. So it's very important indeed that we understand the two separately so that by the time we need to match them, we're able to.
I love that. And you also mentioned a difference between depth as well as coverage. So Lesego, your next question is that how do you make sure that you are incorporating depth and coverage in your answer to make sure that you're at that sea level?
Yeah, I think it's important to, again, understand the business, but understand the question. I think the question is something that because we're so nervous, we try to scheme through. But that 3-test approach where you're reading something 3 times to really understand the question will actually guide you into now planning for the question. So I think what candidates tend to do when they're answering a question is they jump straight into it because you're looking at the time. But remember, the thing with you getting to a C answer is making sure that there is logic to what you're saying and there's a process. So if you haven't even planned a response, you're not going to know, based on the points that I've covered, is it talking about depth or is it covering breadth? Am I going through the 6 disciplines? So for me, I just use my technique where, again, I used to plan on paper. I know we're typing, but I used to plan on paper because I'm a writer, I'm a writing learner. So I would split up my plan and see, is there an audit? Is there a tax? Is there a financial reporting question that's been asked here? And then try to split it in that way. And that will tell you how much you should go through it. So I think what is important is making sure that even when you're asking those technical questions, they're not asking you to dive directly into that technical thing for the length of the question, but have I considered it? Have I touched on it? And am I able to communicate this to the next person? So I think when you look at your response also holistically, is this person that asked you the question, are they able to do what they intended to do with your response? And that will also guide you, is this looking too technical? If a CEO is asking you a question, they're not asking you for the paragraphs in IFRS 15 or whatever the case is. They really want to know high level what is going on and have you allowed yourself to touch on those points. So it's important to plan so that you can direct your response to see how much breadth and depth you should have on a question.
And I think just to add on to your answer, for me, coverage, I interpret it as it's the technical aspect of it. And then depth is basically me applying myself to say, okay, I've considered the technical, but now how am I able to respond to the CFO like you mentioned? Am I able to answer that question that they asked me? And if they look at my work, will they be able to work with what I actually wrote down to go back to a client if that's the case, right? And Sia, sometimes that can be very difficult when you have time constraints, right? You have 8 hours to write the assessment. So now a candidate is asking, what is the exam technique on how to better manage your time on that specific day?
It's going to seem like we also planned this because we're speaking so much about planning. But I'm going to steal a little bit from what I heard Dita say earlier, and I really resonated and I liked it. I think it's very important that in your file, do not put something that you do not understand, that you do not know. You must be able to reproduce your file because there's not much time on the day. Sometimes there's a question or a part of the file you might not be able to get to. So the first thing that prepares you for the day is understanding that file thoroughly and knowing what is on it, having prepared. And also, as Dira would have just said now, to say you prepare not because you're thinking this could be the question, but you want to understand that specific entity. So once you've gotten that understanding, then on the day you start with what you believe you understand the most. Finish those first because the APC, they're not going to mark it based on you started with the first task and then you did the next task. You can start with the last task, start on G, go to F, go to A, go to D. Start with what you believe you are the strongest, write that, finish it, and you're done. Interesting, when I wrote it, there was a question that I believed, I do not know what's happening here. I closed the file, I put it on the side. Because now it was my 3rd attempt, I'm talking about the time I passed, right? I went to the bathroom and I wanted to cry. I can't cry. It couldn't happen. I thought it is over, not the 3rd time. Then I thought, no, man, whatever they asked me, there is something I already know. What I have done is I've planned so well that I've answered where I'm strongest first. I won't lose on this one. Went back, closed the file, and wrote what I thought they were asking me based on the information on the day and applied myself. So I'd say, 1, make sure you have studied your file properly and you know what's there. Secondly, answer what they are asking you there. Start with where you believe you are the strongest.
Can I add something that's very tactical in that one? You have 8 hours. You have to think about the 8 questions you're going to be given, and then you must have some time for review. So what I did is I started by splitting the 8 hours to say every question about an hour. But there are questions that require 5 key points, and then there's that very long, usually IFRS or management consulting, where they ask you for an NPV calculation. Then I go, okay, I'll reallocate time from here, take the 20 minutes to here. This I can do in 40 minutes. This I can do in 30 minutes. It's just 5 key things. And then you want to then have your clock and understand, okay, now I've moved on. When it's time for you to move on, especially from the things that you're good at. What people tend to do is they'll spend the time on the questions that they like, spend that 1 hour, 30 minutes making it perfect, and then lose time on the other one. Move, make sure that you finish that question, go to the next one, and then in your review time, go refine whatever you want to refine and actually have that review. That review time is actually quite important. It's that stand back where you go and look, okay, did I actually answer the questions correctly? So be tactical about it as well. Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with that. That is practically how you do it. Then you make sure that you're meeting that time and you have that review time that he mentions at the end.
And I think moving on is very essential. So what I used to do is that I had a template, and in that template, it basically had number 1 as introduction, and then spaces in between, and then number 6 would be conclusion. So in between, as I'm reading, I'd know, okay, they want this, they want that, and then I'd fill in that template. And as I'm writing my email, I'm ticking so that if it's time to move on, when I come back, I know what's missing, right? So I think it helped me keep track of everything. And I think if maybe the candidate is like a structured person like me, then they can adopt that, because when it's time to move on, unfortunately, it is time to move on, because you'll never finish. Because we all know that if you do not finish a task, it's an automatic fail. So we never want candidates to be put in that position. So Nick, in the previous episode, you mentioned that in the 5 days, you need to plan for an ethics question. But now on the day, how do you actually answer everything, incorporating the CPC that you mentioned, King 4, as well as the other business ethics, right? So on the day now, as a candidate, how am I able to structure my answer to make sure that I'm at a C level?
Yeah, so you get your ethics question on the day, and you kind of have your approach in mind, but it's now how do you actually tackle it? I think it might be a bit controversial, but ethics questions shouldn't actually be difficult. Like, your difficult questions are your IFRS questions. You know, if you're doing something IFRS 16, that's technically hard. Your ethics questions are actually kind of easy relative to that. I remember my ethics lecturer at university said, ethics is actually quite easy. You know, when you get that feeling inside, you know there's something wrong, you can actually do it. But I think it's just, how do you answer that in the exam? And a lot of it comes down to basics and really simple things that sometimes you think, really, do I have to do that? What I always did was my start to any ethics question was identifying what the ethical issue was. And I know it sounds obvious, and maybe it's like, of course, everyone knows that, but you're really just framing it to the marker that I know what I'm talking about. I've picked up, this is a problem. That's what we're going to deal with in this answer. So that was always my starting point. And then it's kind of incorporating those frameworks. I think a mistake that a lot of people can make is trying to put down everything they know about ethics. So trying to pull in the CPC, trying to pull in your business ethics, doing everything into one question where it might not actually be relevant. And I think there you need to be guided by the question. Sometimes it'll be quite explicit and it'll say with reference to the CPC, or considering the laws and regulations. Other times it might be a little bit of a judgment call, but I think the answer is never put down everything that's possibly related to ethics, and then kind of just use your gut a little bit on what that solution needs to be, structured through your frameworks. But yeah, like I said, I think it's the easier question actually. It's not relying you to remember something that you learned in a lecture 4 years ago, or rely on an IFRS.
Sure, that's good. And I love the fact that you mentioned that if your gut is telling you something is wrong, then it's unethical, right? But I think candidates must also remember that your tone is very important. You can't be shouting at, the CFO or whoever you're responding to. I think one of the things I always tell them is that don't address the person, address the problem, address what they did, because that is very important. So, Onkgopote, when it comes to APC, you need to be technical, right? And you need to be a critical thinker. So the candidate is asking, how are you using critical thinking and analysis to move beyond memorization to problem solving?
The consultant in me will jump out. You have to have a particular framework. I think as accountants, we love having exactly going from question to answer. That's what it is. But what this exam is about is actually checking, do you understand what the problem statement is, the complication, the analysis, and then the answer. So when you think about how you actually frame through all of those, for me, what I did practically is I would write what those are after every email. So I would say, okay, email 1, what's the problem statement? What's the complication? Why is this the complication? And then my analysis is then how I got to the answer, and then I get to the answer. So you need to be able to frame that, because it's about identifying that you can understand problems, you know how to identify what the problem issues are, you know to pick up why that's specifically a problem, the context of it. That's where you go back to your information in the day. That's where you use your industry research and say, I know in the industry, this is a particular problem area that's happening. And then you give your analysis of it. You pull in the answers there. And I think the important thing is understanding your audience when you're doing your analysis, right? So some questions you're speaking to a CEO, some questions you're speaking to a technical subject matter expert. Those two people will care about two different things. The CEO just wants the elevator pitch there, the detail, very high level, the answer. The subject matter expert wants the subject matter to be actually critically evaluated in a bit more detail. Again, don't go for 10 pages, right? And then give the answer. So it's again, understanding all of those different parts and ensuring that when you're done, take that stand back, read that email again, and then look at your scenario and say, does this actually answer what the problem is? Yeah.
I think that's very important. And it also goes back to basically applying professional judgment, right? Like we always highlight. So Dida, I'm going to pose a question to you. We are always told that we need to apply professional skepticism in the audit space, right? But now, how do I apply that as an APC candidate writing the board exam?
Many people say candidates neither fail nor pass on the day. They fail or pass during the preparation. I think skepticism is one of those skills that we must apply throughout our entire lives first in every profession. But most importantly, in that preparation period, skepticism must have been applied. Nkgopuzo was talking about verification of facts you find online or facts you find on an AI tool. That's skepticism. You're asking the question of, what are the chances that this could be incorrect? Click on the links, follow through the evidence that you find, recalculate some things that you feel that the number might not be adding up. And that might also then expand more to, if we're talking strategy or any other thing, could be, what am I not looking at in this business? What could I not be understanding? What could I be on the blind side on in terms of this business? And that's what skepticism is all about. To really think, what am I not seeing? What could be away from me here? And where could the blind spot potentially be? And that, I put it again, is not a skill you all of a sudden play out in the exam. It's a skill that you build throughout the 5-day period, and in fact, even earlier than that.
Someone once said to me, just squint your eyes.
You'll make them know that you
Just
doubt
squint
it.
your eyes.
Don't call more.
Yeah, listen, I love that. I love that. Sia, I think time management is something that is very critical, right? And you mentioned a few good points. But now let's say we have an hour left and there's 2 more tasks that I need to do. What do I do as an APC candidate because I'm running out of time?
Oh God, I'll try next year, man. But I think on a serious note, it goes back now to what Nkgopuzo would have added from that question that I had earlier, and also to what he just said now when he responded, talking about the problem statement and that. So in your planning of the exam as you're writing it, from when you start in understanding it, you're going to start match the pre-release to the information on the day. You're going to match it to certain tasks. So what I would do was I'd go to the scenario, and when I would go write it to say this matches to this part A of the pre-release. This matches to also part A of my task. And as Dida would have said, because the information evolves and advances, sometimes what was task A on your pre-release has changed now and actually matches with D on your information that you have prepared. Then you select, I'll write that down as well. Just, okay, now this is D, and then I've got an understanding of that. Then when I have done the understanding I've read, I will decide how I'm going to answer this question is this, and this is what I'll need. And that brings to something that you spoke about, having the frameworks to say, this is how it should look. You draw those up already. So by the time you start answering, you already know how it should look. And when you come to those questions, you already know the response that I require here is a response on this. So if I've got 2 hours left, then I know that that means I've got 1 hour for the one task and 1 hour for the other one. Bearing in mind the time that I need to leave to be able to review what Khonkoputs calls the stand back, I would call the review the question. So give myself 50 minutes to answer as best as I can. But very important, make sure that I, one, have at least covered what I need to cover, and try to go as much as possible in terms of the depth, because that's what they're going to look at as they mark my response. Go to the next one. Then in that 20 minutes that I have to go back to that question and all both questions and the rest of the other questions, then I'm going to look at, have I gone then deep enough? I see that I've covered everything that they would have been asking me. I would have reproduced what I would have learned, but now have I gone enough in terms of that depth? So to save yourself in that 2 hours is to actually be strict on yourself in terms of that time. Cut, move on, come back.
I just want to add on that because he said 2 hours, but I'm thinking those that are panicking, right? I think that moment is consequence management. At that point in time, you need to realize that your response needs to follow a logical approach. So if you have a framework that you've practiced with during the time, you know that you have to pull a miracle in that hour between the two, right? So the reality is the answers need to make sense, okay? So there's no point in going and answering, putting all the points down, but then there's no logical flow. Just make sure that you are so comfortable with what the output is supposed to be, so that even when you're trying to find logic in your panic, the certain points that you mention are there, because APC is not, this is right, this is wrong, this is right. Did you touch on this point? Did you touch on this point? Did the person complete what they needed to do with the response? I think that should be like your sense check. Can they do whatever they needed to do with your response? And that should also help with the consequence management that needs to happen in that 1 hour.
And I think what will also save time is thinking like a CA, right? And now I pose the question to you, Nick. How does a CA actually think? Because in the APC exam, we basically say this is our role, you are a CA or you are a financial analyst. So now we have to put ourselves in those shoes. But as a candidate, you're just a trainee. So now we need to ask ourselves, how does a CA think?
It's a really good question. It's a really difficult question, but it is really good. I think the first thing is reframing that approach and saying, I'm not just a trainee. I'm actually, this is a capstone exam at the end of what's been a 7, 8, 9 year journey. I couldn't have done this exam 4 or 5 years ago, not because of the technical skills, maybe because of the technical skills, but a lot of it's also what you've learned in your journey so far. There's a reason you can only write it once you have some work experience. You know, it's really encapsulating your journey to date, and you are a CA when you're writing this, there or thereabouts. But I think I'm going to lean on some things that Dida and Lesego touched on in terms of how do you translate that into answers then? How do you actually answer like a CA? And I think the one is the depth and breadth and trying to get that right. It's a little bit of understanding your audience and really knowing who is it that you're addressing. And then it's going, have I answered everything that's actually been asked of me? And I think if you can get those 3 right, you're answering like a CA. Where people I think do fall short in this is they lean too heavily either on depth or on breadth, and it's either going way too technical and trying to show that you have all this knowledge that maybe wasn't asked for, but you just want to put it down, or I'm not quite sure what the technical answer is, so I'm just going to touch on all of the wide peripheral things and not actually get to what was asked. Those are the 2 kind of traps I feel of not answering like a CA. But if you can get that mix right, that's really the answer that they're looking for, and that comes from practice. I think there's not a lot of people who kind of go through the first mock exam and are getting C's and HCs and kind of going through no problems. it's something you have to learn and adjust to, and it's how do you take the feedback that you get from those practice exams and adjust.
Yeah, and I think it's basically applying yourself and knowing that it does take practice, right? You don't become a CA overnight. There's a judgment call that needs to be made, which brings me to your question, Ohopote. It says that, how do you deal with questions that require a judgment call when there's no single right answer?
Yeah, I'll make it a philosophical question. If I describe what I deal with every day in the working world, it's not a question of what is right or wrong. It's the question of what we believe in, what we can best socialize, what we're going to work on. It's strategy. And strategy is quite often not the right or wrong answer. It's the direction a company can take. There are many directions, but it's which one do we believe in? That's what they also want you to do. It's becoming and thinking like a CA. That's what you have to do. When you approach those questions where it's a judgment call, there's more than one right answer, it's actually walking the marker through the process that you got to get to what you believe. First thing, you have to make a decision. The worst thing you could do is to get there and be split-minded and have support two positions and not be clear in terms of this is what I believe. You have to take the both options or three options and walk through each. It helps to just tabulate, compare, and say, because of these reasons, I see this one is the one that we should go with. You showed your thinking there. And again, one of the most powerful things you can do in the APC is to say, and we will consult this particular expert. Right? That's also what a CA does. A CA knows who to walk the corridor with. You know, when here, I can give you my answer here as a professional, but there's another subject matter expert that can bring this, and you actually show that. So decide, show why you decided that, and then leave room to say, we can engage. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. You're basically exercising the skill of delegation.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think that as a trainee, you wear many hats. And we are students, we are mothers, we are fathers, we are head of households. We are just in a space where we wear many hats and not just students, right? So Lesego, I'll pose a question to you to say, what does work-life balance look like to you? Because now we're expected to show up as a trainee, but also be on track with our studies on the board courses and make sure that we are also studying on the side to make sure that we don't get sidetracked by something else. So how do you balance it?
The real answer is there's no balance, right? I think I want to change this question and challenge it because I get upset by it because I think it's the wrong question. I think it should be work-life sacrifice. Life is about prioritizing and realizing what is important to me now. Being a mom and a trainee while I was writing APC, I had a lot on the table to try and rationalize to see which one is taking preference at this moment. But I think I made the decision that I want to do APC once. And I want to pass it once because I know the cost of it. It means I'm not spending time with my family, with my friends, with the things that I love. And so the decision that I'm making is to pass. So if I'm making the decision, I don't have control over the consequences. But what I should come to agreement or terms with is that there is going to be a cost to everything that I'm doing. So in that year, in that APC year, my family had to take a knock. My friendship life had to take a knock. The way I exercise, I love netball, I used to love athletics, but I couldn't be an athlete during that year, right? I needed to commit to APC. So I think people need to learn to be honest with themselves and have honest conversations. Like in that year, your priority should be getting over the line because you've understood your journey. If it's 7 years, 6 years, 10 years, we don't know. But it's about having honest conversations with yourself and also reaching out for help. I think for me, I was lucky enough that I wasn't shy about my position and where I was. So I needed to say, I need help. I need support. I remember with ethics, for example, I used to struggle with ethics questions. And I remember a partner sitting down with me to help me prepare for an ethics question because there was no time for me to go and Google ethics questions. So I had to tell this partner, please, how do I answer an ethics question? And they sat me down, best 2 hours of my life. I've never felt an ethics question after that. But it's actually just knowing which avenues to use and also, again, realizing it's not forever. You know what I mean? Like, you have the power to prolong this process depending on the decision that you're going to make. And the reality is the season is going to be done. You just need to honor it, do what it needs for it, and then move on from it, right? Because I think there will be times where I can be a mom and I'm in my wife era, I'm in my CA era, I'm not APCing at this moment, right? But that's on the other side, having context of there's joy on the other side. It's painful now, but I know why I'm doing this and I'm content with the reward afterwards. So don't just focus on trying to find the balance. There's no balance, okay? You need to just make sacrifices, understand the cost of the sacrifice, but also encourage yourself in the hope that there is a bigger reward at the end of it.
I had an analogy that someone gave to me. He said, how do you climb a ladder? You go one hand over the other. You cannot climb the ladder both hands.
hands, yes.
That's it.
Yeah. And I think
Sorry, may I also add on this one? I
Yes.
think I really like this question actually because it talks to where you are when you're doing your APC. You know, you are actually working each and every day. Yes, you might have to sacrifice, and she's right in terms of sometimes you might have to sacrifice a family and that have to sacrifice certain things like exercise. But there's something that's very hard to sacrifice, which is your job in terms of how much work you put in. And I'd say what I did because I started studying and working when I was in CTA, then all the way through become a CA after having passed APC. And the way that I did it was, I know that there's a certain time that I'm sure that I will be at home at this time. For example, it could be 7. So from 7 to 11, I'm studying. Phone is off, everything on the side. Then that's when that sacrifice comes in. Because there's certain things you can't sacrifice. You can't tell your manager, look, I've got to study. I'm not going to make it. I'm not coming this weekend, for example, it's overtime, or I can't work until 6. It won't go so well for you because then you still need to make sure that you are employed in order for you to be able to pay the cost that she's talking about when it comes to APC. So you have to now, for that balance, you can't balance the work and the APC. So the work life is going to be work and APC. Then the rest of the life will have to be now sacrifice. But you make sure that you are strict on time and you do things at a certain time all the time.
So to basically summarize everything that was mentioned here, what is the one-liner you will basically say to candidates? Because most of the time we are dealing with candidates who have had 6 attempts or 7 attempts, right? And now they're in a position where they feel discouraged and they don't know whether they want to continue, because most of them say that I don't think this journey is for me, right? Because I've been doing this for so many years and I'm just not succeeding. So I think give us a one-liner that's going to motivate everybody to keep on going. Lisa, I'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm a bit challenged because I'm going to think about this, but I think for me, doubt is the beginning of failure. The minute you start rationalizing and reasoning with yourself and going through what if, I think that's when you are treading on dangerous territory. So I think it's important to be confident in yourself and really looking at your journey. Like for me, I was so adamant to pass and I made the decision to pass that everything else that I was doing was speaking to that decision. Never underestimate the power of making a decision. And with everything else that's taking place, it's so important to know that like you will be okay. You know, the way you approach a question, the way you even approach this exam, it's just one area of your life. There is just so much to look forward to. So you shouldn't just assimilate your whole life to this one exam, but rather don't doubt yourself, but honor yourself and trust yourself.
Thank you. Dida?
Well, mine is more of general advice than for the assessment itself. I think let's not prepare a solution and look for a problem, but rather find a problem and formulate a solution for that as well. Some people, not everybody, might be finding themselves in a space where they go on and formulate all these solutions, either in their personal lives in preparation for the exam itself or the exam itself. Sometimes I've got these solutions that I've got to force, these answers that I've got to force to questions. Let's find the problem and let's find a solution for that problem.
I love that. Be a problem solver, basically. So, yeah?
Well, my line is actually a very simple line, right? But I'll lead to the line because it talks to having affirmations. And I believe affirmations, they make you believe and know that you have done something. And that's how I like to put my affirmations to not talk about what I want to do, but what I have done. But before that, you have to always remember who you are. This exam or just becoming a chartered accountant, it makes you forget who you are. You're still that top 1% in the country that passed matric and made it to university. You're still the same person that passed all those psycho exams, the same person that had to go through hard articles, be it in audit and finance, or however you would have done your articles. It was really hard. You're still the same person that passed CTA. Yo, find is the hardest thing. So long ago, I don't remember. You're still the same person that passed ITC. So you need to always remember that. And I think that's what I had to remember after having failed twice. And you know what I did first when I failed the second time? Celebrated. Then I started telling myself this affirmation, which I think people should have. It is, I passed APC and for a certain future date. Wrote this down, put it on the fridge because I'll go to the fridge every day. Definitely took a picture, saved it on my phone, and had it as a screensaver on my laptop. And now the managers are asking, hey, my man, what's going on here? Because we saw the results. Now I'm talking about the next one. So I passed APC in December 2025. And you believe that takes you through that exam, even through the preparation, and as you got in an exam on the day. It's hard, but I've already passed it. What that tells your mind is that this is not hard for me. It's easy for me. I've been through it. I've done it, and it relaxes you.
I love that. So it's basically you speaking words of power over yourself, right? You manifesting it. Love it.
I'd say be radically optimistic and toxically positive. Expect the best. Expect the best. Go into that exam with a lot of joy, expecting that things will go well, that you've actually earned all the things you need to demonstrate. You're not learning anything new in that week. You are demonstrating all the battle scars you've collected all the way. Now you're just showing it. And so all you need to do is to be optimistic that you will show it in the right way. That's it.
And if you can't be optimistic, just be delusional.
Exactly. Toxically positive.
And I think just to hyperlink back to what Sia said and what you said, as a candidate, you need to understand that Psycha did not make a mistake when they made you pass the ITC exam, right? You are capable, you're competent. You just need to believe it. Nick?
I'm going to keep mine quite practical to the exam, but for me it's, if something goes wrong, it doesn't mean you failed. And I think it's having that mindset of, you might get a question that you're unsure of. There might be something that you're like, I didn't prepare for this. There's going to be a curveball. That doesn't mean that you're going to fail. It's being able to take that breath, think about, okay, how am I going to approach this? It wasn't what I was expecting, but I've got the opportunity here to do it. If you can do that, you've won half the battle.
I love that. I love that. And that brings us to the end of our episode. Thank you so much, experts. I see you guys as experts in the field. And candidates, if you did not know, all the people sitting beside me are chartered accountants. So Psycha has stamped them and said they are competent at the end of the day when they were writing their APC assessment. So I hope that in this series that you were able to tap into the conqueror mindset and just tell yourself that you can do this, you are capable, you are competent, and you're more than a conqueror, right? We have equipped you enough on how to deal with mental health issues, how to actually be effective in the 5-day pre-release period, and also how to conquer the APC exam on the day. So this is your girl, Ntabi saying Mabuya, and I'm signing out from the APC series.